Hey, how you doing? This is RJ. I want to start off today by saying please, 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 no one out there take me as any kind of authority on anything. Because I have people in my comments that are saying, you're an idiot. You don't know what you're talking about. And I would be the first one to admit that, yes, I don't know what I'm talking about. You're completely right. All that I try to do with my videos is to take facts which I find, and I will link for you, usually in my description, from some interview or some podcast or some statement put out by one of the comic companies. I take those things and I try to connect them through logical thought as best I can to what I actually see going on with comics and with the industry. And that's all I try to do. And there may be a whole lot of factors out there that I don't know about that could explain it in a much better way. And if you want to bring those factors into the comments, go right ahead. I would love if you do so, because the entire point of my videos really is to start discussion, is to get people thinking about comics in a new way, to start discussion about what makes a good comic, what makes a good industry, and hopefully through that thought and through that discussion, we can use those ideas to demand a better product, to demand a better industry. That's all I'm trying to do with my videos. And the reason I wanted to start there was because a lot of people put positive comments about my last video and going over the numbers from Chromacron, and so I thought I'd do another video like that. But when I started to pore over the numbers a little more, I actually found that some of the things that are stated there do support what I said in my last videos. Some of them might actually call into question what I said in my last video, or I might have to refine my thinking on a few of the things from my last video, which I'm going to hopefully do with this video. Because what I really found interesting when going over the numbers for my last video was just how many True Believers comics came out for Captain Marvel in February of this year. Because there was 23 titles in total that were Captain Marvel titles that came out in February, right before the movie, from Marvel. But a lot of them were True Believer titles. So I decided to look into how many True Believer titles are actually out there. How many actually get put out every month by Marvel. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say Marvel's True Believer titles, what they are reprints of older Marvel titles that were printed anywhere between the 60s and the 90s. So they take old comics and they simply reprint them. And that's what they're doing with a lot of these Captain Marvel titles that came out in February of this year. And when I went back through 2018 and January and February of this year to look at all of the True Believer titles, this is what I found. I found that they put out a lot of these titles, and they put out a large number of them, and they sell them for $1. So in my estimation, this would be what I was talking about in my last video with free advertisement that they're putting out. These are basically free comics that they're giving away. Because I would say, and again, I'm not an expert on this at all, but I would say that producing a comic, that is to say printing the thing, would probably cost around $1. Because if it doesn't cost anywhere near $1 and they're charging us $4 to $5 to $6 a comic, then they're really gouging us. But again, in my uneducated opinion, I would say that it probably cost around $1 to actually print these comics. And if they cost $1 to print and they're only selling them for $1, well, then they're giving them away for free, in effect. And how many of these books are they giving away for free? Well, since January of 2018, because I just looked at the numbers between January of 2018 and February of this year, the month that had the highest number of these titles coming out was in September of last year. They put out 220,500 of these comics. And the smallest number would be January of this year, which had about 85,500 comics. So anywhere between 85,000 and 220,000 per month. That's a lot of comics. And that is a lot of advertisement that they're doing for free. But the thing is that when I looked at what kind of titles they were putting out, it would seem that they were advertising for the movies, but not just for the movies. They were also advertising for comics as well. And every month seemed to have a specific title or a specific character that they would focus on. And I'll go over those from January of last year really quickly. So January, they focused on Wolverine. March, Venom. April, Thanos. May, Wolverine. June, Ant-Man. July, Fantastic Four. In August, they really didn't have any titles come out. In September, they did Daredevil, Punisher, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and The Defenders. In October, they did What If. In November, there wasn't any. In December, they did Fantastic Four again. In January, they did Conan. In February, they did Captain Marvel. Now, if you look at those dates, those months, you can pretty much match up what character they're putting out and what character that they are focusing on with these True Believer titles with the television and the movies. Because before Ant-Man came out, they were putting out 7 Ant-Man titles for basically free. When the Netflix shows were coming out for The Defenders, they were putting out 17 different titles of Daredevil, Punisher, Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Iron Fist, and Defenders. That was the 220,000 month. And when Captain Marvel was coming out, they put out 12 different True Believer Captain Marvel comics. So obviously, they are using them as free advertisement for the shows and for the movies. But at the same time, if you look at the other months, you'll see that they're using them to advertise for the comics that they are either bringing back or starting again. So when they had the return of Wolverine, they were focusing on Wolverine. When they had the return of Fantastic Four, they were focusing on the Fantastic Four. When they had the return of What If, they were focusing on What If. When they were trying to sell their Conan comics, they were focusing on Conan. So they are trying to use this free advertisement to actually sell their own comics. However, I would put a little caveat in there and say, in my opinion, the comics that they are bringing back and trying to promote now are the comics that in the future they want to bring into the movies. As far as I know, Fantastic Four is now back under Marvel control, so they can take that title and hopefully bring it into the MCU. I would say that they are trying to bring a new Conan movie into the mix, and that might be a long time down the road, but it would be a different kind of Marvel movie, something like the New Mutants that's coming out. So I would say, to refine what I was saying in my last video, this might be a long-term strategy to bring these things into the movies, not just sell the movies that are actually coming out right now. But here's the really interesting thing that I found when going over the numbers for the sales of these titles. When I was looking at the number of units that these reprints sold at, well, they were somewhere between 10,000 and 20,000 typically. Now, there were some which were much higher than that. There was a Spider-Man title which sold somewhere around 65,000. There was a Punisher that sold 40,000. There was a couple of Thanos ones that sold 30,000. But there was a few that was under the 10,000 mark. So on average, though, it would be between 10 and 20,000 that these were selling at. And the thing is that I did a video at the end of 2018 looking at the numbers for all of the new progressive heroes that Marvel was putting out and what kind of numbers they had for sales. And when you looked at the numbers for these comics of new comics that they're getting people to write and draw, and so paying people to produce rather than just reprinting something old, well, at best, their normal sales, that would be their sales outside of their number ones where they were double shipping and putting in multiple covers, their typical good sales would be around 22 to 25,000 per issue. And their cancellation numbers would be somewhere between 15 and 17,000. That's the cancellation numbers for books like Hawkeye or America Chavez or Iceman or any of these other progressive heroes that were canceled. You know, some did dip down as far as 12,000 before they got canceled. But here's the thing. If those are their typical numbers for sales and for cancellation for these progressive heroes, and you have these other comics which are just reprints of older comics almost matching them in sales when they are doing well, someone really needs to take note of this at Marvel. I mean, It could be that, just as I said in my last video, that Marvel Comics is just now another advertising wing for the movies and for the television and for the merchandise. And if that is the case, really looking at the numbers is not going to change anybody's mind about what is really going to come out, because they don't care about what is coming out of Marvel Comics in the terms of making money for Marvel Comics itself. But if there is any shred of any kind of creative industry left within Marvel Comics, and the people actually running Marvel Comics are thinking about making money for Marvel Comics, all of these bean counters, which again I talked about in my last video, they might start to notice that these numbers don't really match up. Why in the world would they be paying people to write new stories and draw new stories and put out new characters when all they have to do in order to make equal sales is put out reprints of old comic books? It doesn't make any sense. And if you add into that mix what are the top sellers for Marvel, you look at older heroes like Spider-Man. These are the big number comics that are actually coming out of Marvel. They typically get up there into the top 10. So if these bean counters are looking at the numbers, if they're seriously looking at what is going on, that these older heroes are selling really well, in this market anyways, so in your top 10, top 20, top 30 of comics, you have older heroes, and their reprints of older comics are actually doing as well as these newer quote-unquote heroes, then why in the world would you actually concentrate any of your resources whatsoever on these new heroes? And hopefully, those newer progressive heroes will soon be abandoned. So, if I've given you anything new to think about, hit like, hit the shield in the lower right hand corner of your screen to subscribe, and leave me a comment. Tell me what you think about all this. Alright, I'll see you later. Bye.